to a live chat with Rough Edges. I'm super excited to introduce my guest, Olivia Alvizo-Johnson. And Olivia is a millennial first gen therapist, and she's the owner of Liv Curiously, that's LIV, Curiously Therapy, and she helps Gen Z and millennial women of color navigate anxiety, people pleasing, low self esteem, and relational trauma. And today we are going to be talking about breaking the cycle of people pleasing and eldest daughters and their role in that. But before we dive into all that, Liv, I want to ask you, what are three things that you're most passionate about and why?
Ooh, that is a wonderful question. But also, first, like, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and to just kind of talk about this topic because that is like my jam. I know that might sound silly, but it is. But you said my three like passions.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. I feel like these sound very simple, but to me, is like family. To me, is like number one. Like they kind of keep me going. They're like constantly encouraging me, and I swear I couldn't do it without them. Another passion is I love scary movies. Like
Me
maybe
too.
to me that is like when you just like have a hard day, maybe, especially with like therapy, being a mental health provider, or just like the craziness that kind of goes on. I am just like I love movies and I love scary movies. Um and then I guess a third thing that I'm passionate about, I think I'm kind of stumped on that third one. But I think it's just also enjoying, again, like it sounds so simple, but like just enjoying like food or like going to a restaurant, grabbing ice cream with my family. And the reason why those feel like passionate to me because it's what keeps me going on a day to day. So yeah,
Wow.
thank you for
I,
asking.
I love that. Like, yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned about family, because it's so important. It's the foundation of who we are and what we do. And also, I really love the fact that you love scary movies because,
Yeah.
girl, I love scary movies too. My family looks at me like I'm crazy, but I'm like, yo, I just love horror films. Like,
Yes, I recently
yeah,
saw The Conjuring, me and my husband, and I was like jumping in the theater. Yeah, it was great.
yeah. Wait,
You
what's
get
your,
me.
huh?
You get me. You get the passion for the scary movies.
Yes. Wait, what? Okay. I need to ask, what are your like maybe top two or three?
That's a hard one. I always tell people I'm such a like not a great person of like top five because I'm like, oh, I like this, I like this. But a lot of people do not are like it's like a yes or no, but like I actually really like the Michael Myers, like the very first Halloween. It just feels more like it's just a tradition at this point. So I
Yes.
feel like that's like top two. And then I would honestly say like the Conjuring movies because they're just like, yeah, they're scary. What about
Yeah.
yourself? Do you have any like top?
Oh yeah. So I would say Hereditary.
That's a good one.
I love Hereditary. Like I saw it for
Yes.
the first time and I was like, now that's
Yeah.
a horror movie. And then Get Out, that's another one that I
Oh my
really
gosh.
enjoy.
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes.
And my last one would be the first Paranormal Activity. Because
Okay.
girl,
Okay.
like
I love your top.
I
Yes.
was watching that at 3 a.m. I set myself up. Like
You're like, what am I
yeah.
doing right now?
Right, right. So, today we are talking about breaking the cycles of people pleasing and how eldest daughters fit into that. And I love that you like focus on eldest daughters and first gen, like for Gen Z and millennials. So, can you talk about what made you want to go into that work in the first place?
Yeah. You know what's crazy about this is like I first came into the field thinking I'm gonna work with like addiction, substance use, and like trauma surrounding people's experiences. And then like over time, it kind of evolved, and I think I've reached this place. I've been in the field for like 10 plus years. That now, what I've noticed, I just so happen to be the eldest in my family. No, but I like to kind of label myself as like a recovery people pleaser. So I think that to
Mhm.
me, I've noticed that like I ended up just kind of working with clients and specifically like millennial women of color who also just so happen to be like, if they weren't like the eldest child, they were like the eldest daughter.
Mm.
And there was just so much like similarities in terms of a lot of guilt about self-care. There were trouble saying no, but then like wanting to have relationships with families. And I just found it just ended up being in this space where it's like I became passionate about it because one, I can kind of relate in some ways, but also um I could just see the women that I worked with too, just feeling like they really didn't have anybody else to like talk to, or felt like no one else really kind of understood where they were coming from.
Mm.
And so now it's like, I mean, and it sounds maybe kind of weird to say this, but I like truly love working with like, especially specifically like women of color, like first gen, who are just also trying to break like generational cycles that kind of tie in to the people pleasing. So I guess to try to keep it short, that is, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I do love what you said about, because I'm also the oldest.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I have a younger sister. So I understand the whole like wanting to sacrifice and like, putting everybody else's needs above your own. But it's something that you said about the fact that we feel that guilt. Like, can you talk about that guilt? Like, have you ever experienced the guilt of like, oh, if I don't take care of everybody, everything's going to crumble around me? Like, how have you experienced that? And what did you do to kind of combat that?
Yeah, I think the guilt for me was this: I need to kind of make everybody happy. Meaning,
Mhm.
if there was any kind of conflict, I would feel very anxious about it, like heart racing, feeling like my mind, like, how do I make everybody okay and happy? Because then I would feel guilty if I didn't try to do something, right? And in combating, I thought I was combating it by like, okay, well, let me just not let things get to me. But really, that was me avoiding it and not actually
Mm,
like addressing it. And
right.
I'm saying this, yes, as a therapist, but first as a human, honestly, going to therapy and truly like addressing like where my own kind of guilt and like people pleasing behaviors was stemming from. I think being in therapy and really also specifically finding a therapist that was also maybe around my age, but also a woman of color. Um, because I had two therapists before her that just wasn't like a right fit. But for
Yeah.
me, what come like really helped me cope and like really identify like my own people pleasing patterns and my own guilt was literally meeting with her every single week. And I still meet with her to this day. It's been like 4 plus
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, and before I give my comments, I want to shout out Kylie, and also forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Alua Benga Beauty. Hi guys, thanks for
Hi.
joining. And feel free to put any questions or anything. We're talking about breaking the cycle of people pleasing. So feel free for all you people pleasers out there for your
Yes,
comments, questions.
please. No
Yeah.
judgment here.
No judgment, judgment-free zone. But, yeah, in response to what you said about, like, the guilt part, it's just, like, you wanna make everybody happy, and that's at the core of people pleasing. Like, I wanna make sure that people around me are feeling good and everything's great so I could avoid conflict.
Mhm.
And, like, you mentioned earlier a little bit, like, you would get anxiety when there was conflict. Like, do you still feel like that sometimes? Like, have you learned to manage that, or
Yes, you know what's so interesting? I always tell people like a lot less anxious now. I didn't realize how anxious I was like 5 plus years ago, but I still get anxious when I sense any conflict between people, or if I have to like address something or someone, I can feel the anxiety. But for me, what's really been helpful for me is like parts work that's related to like internal family systems, and like kind of somatic practices. So, kind of being more in touch with my body. Kind of, my therapist was really able to kind of help me name like where in my body maybe I was feeling my anxiety. And when I say by parts work, it's like, kind of identifying like the inner child, right? So for me, was her helping me navigate like, oh, I'm feeling anxiety. Does this remind you of a time in the past? And if so, what age, right?
right.
And if little me was sitting next to me, like, what would I say to her, right? The one that was feeling anxious about something, especially if there was conflict or felt like, she didn't know what to do and was confused or maybe felt lonely. I think it was now, where I am now, I'm able to now have more words of like what I'm feeling internally.
Mm,
Um, and now I'm able to, the big one I think for people pleasing is like asking for help,
mm,
especially with eldest daughters, the idea of like, well, I don't know who to turn to. I'll just figure it out on my own and I'll kind of suffer in silence and pretend
mm.
like I'm okay.
Yeah.
And now it's more of like, no, I can ask for help, right? Let me take a second to see if I can figure this out on my own. And it's okay to be like, you know what? Let me call my husband because I need to talk this through with him, or let me call my sister, um, or let me call my mom, right? Like those are the three people for me that I'm like, I need to talk to somebody to kind of talk through it, knowing so to remind myself that I'm not alone. I think sometimes, and I see this even with clients that I work with who, are eldest daughters who feel like, well, my family might not understand, or
Hmm.
they feel like they have taken on so much of the responsibility that they're like, I'm the person that everyone turns to. Who am I supposed to turn to?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's so real though, because it's like as the oldest sibling, it's like you're not only like the blueprint, but you're also expected to be the rock of the family. And it's like that is just so much pressure to put on a person. Like it's just when we're having a hard time, like where do we go, like you said, who do we turn to? And it's so important to know that, like you said, asking for help is like
Hmm.
such an important thing for us to do, because we're not an island, we're not by ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, so I really like appreciate the fact that you brought that up. And then also I do want to ask, as a therapist yourself, like
Yep.
how have you seen your clients show up with people pleasing, and what is your advice to them?
Yeah. You said like how do people show up? Like how do their people please show up?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it definitely manifests differently for a lot of people, but I'm just what's coming to mind is I remember I think at one point someone had mentioned it at one point in session about um like rarely ever saying no to people. Um, and when asked, like, "Oh, you're like kind of curious," like, never. Like, I'm pretty sure you do. Wish they do.
Right.
But I think it's this idea. There's just like an immense like anxiety of like, I cannot let this person down. I cannot let disappoint this person. And so it weighs so heavy. And I think shame also kind of ties into that of like, there's just almost feels like this block where they just can't say no, or maybe another way someone has kind of shared is I think it's also like getting into the helping profession, right? Like I definitely notice that eldest daughters are usually if they or if they're like kind of falling in this people pleasing cycles, they tend to maybe be teachers, other mental health providers, medical professionals, right? Which is like a great thing. We need people in those roles, and also I think it's this idea of like they always giving to other people. Like I'm gonna help everybody. I'm gonna help everybody. I'm gonna help everybody, and then the next thing you know, they're coming to therapy and they're like, I don't know, something seems off. And they tell me their story, and it's like, whoa, it's because you've been like basically going for
Right.
like most of your life. And it's not like they're so exhausted. And there's more to it, but I think just to kind of keep it brief here, there's just this emotional exhaustion, this emotional like deep soul exhaustion, if that makes sense. And I think for them, it's kind of working through like where maybe that might be stemming from, that might be like family trauma, any type of relationship trauma in their past, um, and kind of helping them work through a lot of that too, and like validating their emotions and kind of then helping them create certain, especially like assertive communication skills to help them then advocate for themselves. I think sometimes they can have like a really hard time advocating for themselves. Um, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And it's so funny. I didn't even notice that pattern. Like, oh, we are in like self-serving, like we serve other people
Interesting,
all
right?
the time. Yeah, like I'm a case manager, to give you an example.
Oh,
Like,
okay. Yeah.
so
I
when you
was a case manager a long time. Yeah.
what? Really?
Yeah, in supportive housing in New York City. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, offline, we got to talk about that
Yeah.
because like
Yes, please.
but like yeah, it is a pattern. Like people who are always positioned in a place of like always helping somebody, they naturally gravitate towards like being a therapist or being like a social worker or a teacher, and it's like we don't really think about it, but like you said, we come into therapy with a whole lot of baggage, because throughout the day, 8 hours a day, every single day, like we are helping people, and it doesn't stop
Right?
when we're off the job. We go home and we have to help people. Like it's just so much that we come in with. So do you, okay, in terms of like work life balance, because I'm very curious about
Woo! Okay, yeah.
that. Yeah. Like how? like if a client were to come to you, right, and be
Uh,
like, "Hey, I'm so overwhelmed at work and I feel like my work never stops when I come home." Like, what would you say to somebody who feels overwhelmed with that and wants to be a people pleaser, wants to please their boss, wants to please their family? Like, what would you say to that client?
ooh. I feel like I say a few things, and it also depends on the person. But I think a general thing that I noticed that I at some point say to almost all my clients, I'm sure at some point, I bet you if they all got together, which would not be ethical. But anyways, what if they all got together? Would be like, you're taking care of everybody else. I'm curious who's taking care of you. If you
Mm,
didn't complete this task at work, will the whole company kind of fall apart? So there's a little bit of like also maybe cognitive challenging a little bit, because I think sometimes with people pleasing cycles it kind of, and connected with anxiety specifically, I can hear from folks that like there's also this internal like anxious monologue of like, well, if I don't do it then no one else is going to do it, or someone at
right.
work didn't offer to help so then I just said it because no one helped. And it's like, or I think it's also a little bit of like gentle challenging with folks, but like, again, right? Like if you're taking care of everybody else, who's taking care of you? And what if you didn't say yes to that one task? Kind of like everything will be okay. Also, kind of reassuring that like they'll be okay. Because I think sometimes with anxiety, it's hard to imagine that you'll be okay if you did something different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love what you said about like we think sometimes that everything is so much on our shoulders that if we stop doing like one thing, everything is gonna fall apart. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like catastrophizing in a way where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, if the world will end if I'm not doing
Yes.
like 10 different tasks. And it's like, it sounds kind of silly, but when you're in the moment, it really feels like that. You're so burdened down by so many responsibilities that you feel, man, if I don't do anything, like nothing's gonna get done. Nobody else is gonna do it.
Hmm.
And like I love also your Instagram page, by the
Oh,
way,
thank
because
you.
like
It gives
you
me
just
so much
have
stress sometimes, but thank you.
yeah, but I'm thinking about this one post that I saw in terms of like here's as a therapist, here's what I wouldn't say to a first gen, like Gen Z
Mm,
millennial about
yeah.
breaking cycles. Like, can you talk about that? Like, what made you like put that post out there? And
Ooh,
what are
yeah.
yeah, what would you not say to
Yeah. Oh, that was a while ago. Oh my god, I appreciate that.
them?
Like what made you make you want to like create that post?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't even know if I remember at that time. This has been a minute, but I think it was, I think it's a mix of my own kind of incorporating my own experience, and I think my own like uh maybe my own idea of what I thought therapy was. Like this was before I became a therapist and I was wanting to go to therapy. I think I had some like um image of therapy where like kind of like the movies where you just kind of go in and like the therapist says like one thing and now this is huge breakthrough and you're perfect forever and your
Right.
healing stops, you're at a finish line. And I realized that's not what it's like. But then it's also a mix of, I think, kind of breaking the mental health like stigma. I think specifically like with for like women of color or just like other communities too, of like therapy is like not bad, right? Or, kind of, and so I think it's like a mix of like, yes, my own personal experience, but also I think there's still maybe a lot of folks that maybe haven't tried therapy that just kind of have this maybe image, and that's just like, oh well, it's not for everybody, or it's just someone that's gonna tell me what to do and judge me,
Hmm.
when that's not really the case at all, or at least I try not, not to do that. So yeah, I think I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's it's sometimes I wonder if certain things are like my message is getting across. So it's great to hear that that kind of stuck out to you.
Yeah, I mean, and I loved that post in particular because it's like you said, we have an idea of what therapy is supposed to be. We think it's supposed to be this big revelation, or I'm breaking chains and I'm breaking cycles after 2 sessions, like
Yeah.
so it's just interesting to see like how people who are in the mental health field or people who do work in human services, social services, like just to see the element of growth, because I
Mhm.
think a lot of the times we get impatient with ourselves and it causes us to pressure ourselves into doing a lot of things that we necessarily don't want to do. And I think people pleasing is a byproduct of that self doubt, of that feeling of
Yes.
inadequacy, you know?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. And I think, like you said, the self doubt and the lack of self trust. I think that's the
Mm,
one, that's like another thing again, whether it's like my own personal experience or like, working with clients is like across the board, there's this consistent level of like, there's this lack of self trust too. Right. And so it's just very interesting as folks like when I work with someone like over time, I could kind of see that like self trust has kind of built up and their confidence builds up, their
mm.
self-esteem builds up, and then the next thing you know they're kind of coming into session being like, oh my gosh, I just like said X y and z to a family member and I can't believe I did that and the whole world
Right.
didn't explode, right? So it's pretty cool to like hear those moments for people because it's like those are the moments where you're like, okay, you're something is shifting, something is evolving. It's not perfect and it'll never be perfect and that's okay, but what kind of that, like, I guess that consistent work, healing work is definitely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about self trust because it's so funny, but like we talk about self doubt
Yeah.
so much. Like, and we don't talk about self trust. So, can you break that down? Like, what is self trust and like, how do we build it?
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna use myself for an example because I think that's like the easiest way. And I
Hmm.
don't know if maybe you can resonate with this, but like even before, coming on here, right, to talk with you there, I think there was a part of me that didn't trust that like I knew anything. I was like, what if, the anxiety sits in, like, what if I don't know what I'm talking about? And it's like, well, actually, like I think there's this part that didn't trust that like listen, I've been in the mental health field for 10 plus years. Like I have experience, right? Like I'm very passionate. Truly, I love what I do. And I think there's this moment where there's this part that just feels like, nope, can't do it. I don't trust myself. And, for me, what was also was like, you know what? I'm going to take some time to prepare, right? I'm going to maybe listen to certain music or maybe like an inspirational thing on YouTube to remind, right? Kind of like maybe even affirmations. And even though I'm just kind of giving this example now, but I think that self trust can also bubble up in anxiety where there's this, I think, whether it's like, if I notice it within myself or like a client, it's this immediate response of, I don't know what to do.
Mm.
I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this decision. So I'm gonna like call like 20 people and ask their like opinions and be like,
Yeah.
okay, because someone else probably has the right answer, right? Like
Absolutely.
someone else knows better than me. Or maybe nowadays ChatGPT knows better than me, right? Social media knows better than me. And so kind of is not being able to, there's nothing wrong with asking people for their advice, but at some point it's like, how do you then kind of make that decision for yourself? And it can be really hard for some folks that are like kind of stuck with or like lacking kind of that self trust.
Yeah, and that's such a great point about like not really relying on ourselves. And I know we like to think about self-sufficiency and self-reliance as like doing a whole bunch of things and like making all these accomplishments. But like what about self-reliance and like, you know what? I am qualified. I do belong in this space. Like I was
Hmm.
hired for this job. Why am I second
Right?
guessing? You know, like if
Yeah,
I was hired already, like they already made their decision, you know? Like they already made up their
exactly.
mind. Yeah, like
Or do you have your own kind of like ways or maybe mantras or affirmations or ways to, yeah, if you experience any like anxiety or anything?
yeah, what I usually do is try to put myself outside of the
Mm,
situation and I
yeah.
would be like I would literally just talk to myself and be like, "Wait, Sarah, realistically speaking though, like let's say I'm like I'm like, let's say I got hired for a new position and I'm like, oh, just to keep the job example. Like,
Yeah.
oh, am I good enough to be here? Like, oh, was I like, a DI hire or something? like
No, that's so real
like
though.
that's
Yeah.
very real.
Yeah.
And whenever I feel like that, I got to step outside of myself and be like, okay, you know what, Sarah? You have the experience. You worked in this job. Like, I would be just like chronologically going through my resume in my head. And I'm
Like
like,
you
girl,
got this.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like, why am I doubting myself? So it's like
I
reminding
love that.
yourself of like what you have like what you've gone through, what you've accomplished. And I'm guilty of this all the time. Like I would just celebrate for a little bit, like, oh yay, I did this. All right, next thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like I think about it, or wow, I everything that I've been through to get this degree, or to get to this situation, this job, or to do this accomplishment. Like we are so focused on what's next that we
Mhm.
miss, like, okay, I actually accomplished this despite the challenges, despite the stress, despite spending all that late night on papers to get it
Right.
done. Like like we don't think about that. We think, "Oh, I got the degree. Great.
Yeah.
What's the next thing?" You
Like,
know?
keep it pushing. You're like, "Hold up, wait a minute, I gotta celebrate." You gotta celebrate, savor this moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where the self-doubt comes in a lot, because
Yeah.
we literally don't look at our resume. Like we don't think,
Mm.
oh,
Yeah.
like,
That's so
I've
true.
done this before, or I have experience. And like you were saying, you're like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. I'm like, girl, I visited your page, and I'm like, she definitely knows what she's talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we always like think about the bad, and we always think
Yeah.
about, oh, I'm not good enough. But sometimes you got to ask yourself, why am I thinking that I'm not good enough? Like, what lie am I believing about myself and about
Mm.
the situation, you know?
Yes. You know what's so funny that you said that? I actually encouraged a client to do that earlier today of like they were like doubting themselves, like talk out loud to yourself. Like I think
Yeah.
sometimes we need to literally talk out loud and give ourselves that pep talk like, hold up, wait a minute, what is going on here?
Right.
Like because everything just happens so internally that once you start
Mhm.
talking things out loud, you're like, wait a minute. Okay, yeah. And I
Right.
think that's kind of the same even like with people pleasing or like the eldest daughters, I think once they start to kind of say things out loud, they're like, oh, like certain ways how my parents treated me and how family members have treated me is like not okay.
Right.
Right. It's really like looking at like how am I also like respecting myself by taking care of myself, by saying no, by like, maybe addressing some past family trauma, which can be very difficult for folks, of course. And all of that kind of connects too, right? All of it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I do that's why I love therapy, because it's literally just talking through your thoughts. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of minimizing what it actually is, but
No,
like,
no, but yeah, it's a big
yeah,
part
that's
of
the
it.
process, right? And so, like, when we sometimes when I'm in therapy, like, and I talk to my therapist, I'm like hearing myself, and I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds so stupid when I
I
said
know.
it out loud.
Same, same. My therapist would be like, "Well, I'm glad you caught it, cause like I was gonna say something. I don't know what's going on here." I was like, "Oh yeah." That's funny.
Yeah, like, it's something about speaking it out loud that gets you to realize, huh, maybe that thought is not true, because it
Yes.
sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but because when we're internal in our minds, it's like
Yep.
everything feels so much bigger. Everything feels so overwhelming. But when we put it out on paper, when we talk it through with a friend, like you realize, oh, that situation wasn't as big and overwhelming as I thought it
Right?
was. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I always joke that like as humans we like think way too much. Like it's not
Yeah.
a bad thing, but sometimes we do then we overthink, right? And then it's like, all right, this isn't helping.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and so I also want to go into your work with like first gen, like Gen Z and millennials. Like what made you want to work with first gen specifically?
I do identify as a first gen, and that can mean like also too like you could be like the first in your family to like go to college or maybe like do something different career rise or like the first to like go to therapy right
Yeah.
or even like starting generational cycles which I mean that can be like a whole other topic right rooted in
Yeah.
generational trauma and that's just like another thing but I think another thing that I've noticed is that I ended up just getting more and more like inquiries from like folks that were usually in the Gen Z millennial kind of age group. And then I realized over time that like, oh, like this is, I can work with many, many different people, but I think that with Gen Z and millennial, we can just click. Right. And I think that's so important. And I in therapy, and I always tell people like if I'm not the therapist for you, like, tell me. That's not gonna hurt my feeling. Like, this is your time. You better find a therapist that you feel like
Right.
you can click with. So, and maybe with millennials, it's also like a certain, like, grew up in a certain pop culture era, or and stuff like that. And I think that that also kind of ties into it too. And even with Gen Z, it was, even though some of their lingo, I'm like, huh, I don't know what that means, but like we're
Right.
clicking, we're vibing, and it works. And it just, I think it's there, some of the things that even that they're encountering is also still very similar from women who are, in their late 30s, kind of like, or elder millennials, that it's like, oh my goodness, like across the board, right? That there's still like certain like women who are not only eldest daughters, but first generation. And I think there's just this immense um, pressure to just kind of go with the status quo or certain cultures in their family, and it's just not aligning with their true selves. And I think that that can be really scary to like kind of
Mhm.
step away from that.
Right.
And in so many ways, my own personal experiences kind of overlap with that. And so it's definitely something that, yeah, I almost kind of forgot what the original question was at first. I get very excited talking about all of this.
No, you're good. You definitely answered the question. Like, it's like it
Good.
does. It seems so like first gen. Like you're not only the oldest in most cases, but you're also the very first one to do something in your family that hasn't been done like for generations or at all.
Hmm.
So, what? How do you usually encourage a first gen who wants to take a step outside of what their family either does or doesn't do? Like, how do you encourage them to take that step?
Yeah, it could be a scary one. And sometimes I'll even tell people, like, sometimes it is okay to do things a little scared. And
Mhm.
also, they might actually be surprised that their family might be more supportive than maybe that they're worried about.
Right.
And yes, that everybody's different, but I think that not trying it, they'll never know. And if they do try, at least they kind of do know, or maybe even kind of shift. I know this is kind of vague, but like maybe kind of shift. And so, take for example, boundaries, right? Like it's like, oh, a few clients have like, oh, I've never really said like no to my parents or like to my mom. And one day it's like something. It can sound like so small, but it's so big. Of like, I didn't actually pick up the phone when my mom called. Oh my gosh, like I never do that, right? But she calls like 20 different times in a day, and everything is like I have to drop everything that I'm doing to like, tend to, of course, and it's can be hard because they of course they love their parents, but I think then it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't pick up the phone. And yes, my mom got mad, but you know what? Everything is okay. Because I think that's the other part. They're also worried that maybe they'll feel disappointed or mad, which is totally understandable. Um, but I think it's also kind of encouraging them, again, going back to what I said earlier, of like, you're, kind of out there helping everybody else. Who's helping you? Like, who's taking care of you? And I
Mhm.
think when I say that, it kind of sits with them of like, oh, shoot, like, who is taking care of me, right?
Right.
And so I think that self-respect, right? The self-trust and the confidence to believe in themselves, to be like, you know what, I'm gonna also accept whatever does happen because I can figure it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, that's perfect. And it's just like you said, that self-respect and that self-reliance and learning how to create boundaries is just like so important.
Yes, so huge. It can be so scary. It's still very scary sometimes for me to like stick up for myself or speak up. And it doesn't have to be sticking up for yourself, but like just speaking up, it can be very scary, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Olivia, I just want to thank you so, so much for joining me. But before we go, I have
Yes.
one final question for you.
Bring it
Uh, what advice or words of encouragement do you have for someone who's struggling to break the cycle of people pleasing?
on. You're not alone. You're not the first. And sometimes it's okay to do it scared. And it's okay to ask for help.
Mm,
I know it sounds so simple, but I think that those are some of the words that I think I needed to hear in the past. That there are people here that can understand what you're going through, um, and want to help you.
mm.
And I think some people don't give themselves enough credit that they're more than capable. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, again, Olivia, thank you so much for joining me. It was
Thank
great.
you for having me.
Yeah. So, everyone, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges.
Bye.
Bye.